Welcome to the People Priority Podcast, where we dig into topics that help you show up as your best self for you and your circle of influence. I'm your host, Julie Schneers, a teacher turned speaker, team culture consultant, and leadership growth coach who loves people. Join me every week for conversations that will motivate, educate, and hopefully just inspire you to grow through the power of communication, connection, and confidence. Because you and your people, you're worth it. I cannot wait for today's episode because the guy we're bringing on is one of my favorite people. His name is Dominic Vogel. He's the founder and chief strategist at CyberSC. Listen, I met him on LinkedIn. So that just tells you how cool connections can be on LinkedIn. Dominic is well respected in the world of cybersecurity and has appeared in media news outlets across North America and internationally on BBC World News. Dominic focuses much of his energy on providing strategic security leadership to technology startups and small to mid-sized businesses to proactively solve their cyber risk challenges. He coaches, he leads. My favorite thing about him is that he's a self-professed positive troll, and he believes in the power of uplifting others. I am so excited about today and having this conversation. Dominic, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm not sure how the heck I'm going to match that energy, Julie.
You're so amazing. Okay, so I just have to give a little bit of background knowledge here for everyone listening. So I get on LinkedIn, which you do as an entrepreneur. You're like, okay, I have to make connections and I have to meet people. Like, that's the goal. And you come across people like you and you connect. Not really knowing, especially when you're new to LinkedIn, what connection means and what that's going to look like in the world of LinkedIn. I'm barely learning Instagram. Facebook's all I had known before. That just dates me, doesn't it? But Dominic starts saying positive things on every single one of my posts. And at first you're like, well, that was nice of that guy that time. Well, that made me feel like I don't suck. Well, maybe I should keep posting. He's very encouraging. You know what? Maybe I need to be more encouraging. And truly the heart of LinkedIn kind of is glowing because of people like you. And it's made all of us look at how we connect and communicate on platforms like LinkedIn because of your kindness and giving to others. So I guess I'm starting with just taking over and saying thanks.
Well, thank you for that, Julie. I genuinely appreciate that. And I've been doing this for about 3 years, trying to be that, what I refer to as a positive, encouraging, shining light. Social media, as you know, can be a very dark and toxic place. Even, professional sites like LinkedIn. And, for the longest time, I approached it as just a sales tool. Like if you looked at my LinkedIn stuff from 3 years ago, it's just me trying to hawk my security services. And then help me nowhere. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe I can unlock things through kindness, right? And I'm a firm believer, magic happens when you're just kind to one another.
And I agree with you. I love that. And you do that. You definitely demonstrate it. But I want to just talk about time for a second. How much time do you spend investing in others?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm going to say that it's between sort of 60 minutes to 90 minutes a day that I spend investing on that. I used to think about it in terms of leads and, did that convert the business and all that. But about a year ago, it dawned on me that this is more of a long-term game, right? That I need to take a longer-term vision here in which if I take the time to invest in meaningful, life-enriching relationships and look at this over a 25, 30-year period, those types of meaningful, life-changing friendships, you can't put an ROI on that. They manifest in just magical, unknown ways that you just don't know, right? And that you can't easily attach a number to. So at the end of every quarter, I always look and say, okay, well, how many new friendships did I start as a result of LinkedIn? How many friendships did I continue to strengthen? That, to me, are the metrics that I look at because I'm a big believer. You invest in the relationships like that over a long period of time. It's just amazing. Speaking opportunities, podcast opportunities, business, all things which I don't have to hard sell, right? By just being kind, by investing in friendships and being a servant friend, someone who is true and genuine and coming from a place of kindness and compassion. You don't need to sell, and that's what I'm a big believer in. So I can see the ROI. But I can't attach a number to it. That's why I tell people, I sort of look past the instant gratification, and that's the thing that a lot of us struggle with. We don't get a benefit like that. We just get thought with our time. It is worth our time, right? To me, investing in yourself, investing in relationships, greatest thing you can do.
I love that. And, I work with businesses, and one of my biggest preaches is connections and relationship building and how the power of building relationships with those in your space in any room, whether it's the classroom, the boardroom, the living room. I know that you've heard me with my spiel on that, but the investment in relationships, one, it's going to take time, but we are such a rate of return type mindset culture that it's hard to get out the rat race of that. How did you make yourself look at the relationship rather than the rate of return?
Yeah, that's such a good question. To me, again, it's the big word that I looked at was consistency, right? And I thought anyone can leave a kind comment once. That's not hard. It really isn't. But doing so again and again and again, day after day, week after week, month after month. And that's how I started to invest in relationships, where I would, early on my LinkedIn journey, I would just leave those positive, high energy, uplifting comments and not just do it once, right? I would do it day after day, week after week, month after month. And I would see with those relationships that people would start responding, like with you, right? I saw that you started responding with a very high energy way. And I thought, hey, okay, now this person is seeing that I am showing up every day. I'm going to try and take this relationship to the next level. Maybe we can have an offline conversation. Maybe we can move this to a different, communication form rather than just commenting back and forth with LinkedIn. That is how you can progress a relationship. And I'm a big believer too, in which, you don't need physical proximity to develop meaningful relationships. You and I have never met. I do look forward to the day we will meet. That will happen one day. I promise you that. Like, one of the things that I truly have recognized and realized now is that to form meaningful relationships, you don't need physical proximity. What you need is what's often referred to as emotional proximity. If you are available for that person emotionally, right, you are there to support, you're there to uplift, you are there to provide kindness and compassion and remind that person that they do matter, they do bring value. That's a type of emotional proximity that physical proximity doesn't, right? Just because you see someone every day, it doesn't automatically make them a great friend. Some of the greatest friendships I have formed over the past few years, yourself included, Julie, have been with people I have never met. I've only interfaced virtually. And that to me is the power of showing up consistently, investing in those relationships. And then when you recognize that the person on the other side is responding in a similar way, then you can take that relationship to the next level.
And how powerful is that piece of advice for anyone who's a remote worker?
I think it's huge. Something that I wish as an entrepreneur that I recognized earlier on. I wish it's something that I recognized back at my corporate days as a manager, as a leader. It's something I wish I had preached to my team and staff as well, that we don't have to physically be next to each other, like to be friends, to get the best out of each other, right? And as you mentioned, with like a remote access worker, someone who works remotely and maybe physically is cut off from people, by taking the time to show up consistently, right? That's to me is the big word. I mentioned earlier, I'm going to say it again, I'll probably say it again later. Consistency is the key there, right? Showing up once is not hard. Showing up twice is not hard. Right? Showing up time after time. Even if someone doesn't respond, I remember some people become great friends. They didn't respond to the first few comments, but they saw that after a few weeks, I was still commenting, and they're like, "Wow, you're still commenting. I really appreciate that." And that to me again is the root of the consistency there, right? And there's people I know who I've supported who got very few likes early on. I was one of their early supporters. Yeah. Now they have hundreds or thousands of likes, right? And they're like, you were one of the few. And you mentioned this earlier, Julie, when you're like, you know what, this person makes me feel good. Maybe I should keep posting. What I'm doing does matter. Maybe there is value in it, right? And there's just tremendous power in that, right? And I think that's something that anyone, whether they're an entrepreneur, remote worker, right? Again, if you take the time to display compassion and kindness, and like I said, positivity, and I'm not talking about necessarily toxic positivity, but positivity as a whole, it's in such short supply in our society. We're quick to be cynical. We're very quick to be jaded, right? We're very quick to point out the flaws in the people, right? Positivity as a whole is not nearly as high as I think it should be. And that's why words that I say stand out. Part of it, makes me sad that there aren't more people who are trying to be more positive and uplifting. But I think therein lies an opportunity for your viewers and listeners, right? Use the power of positivity. Use the power of consistency, of consistently uplifting and empowering people. Your life will just open up tremendously as a result.
I agree with you so much. And I love that you're sharing impact you have seen make, because that's one of the questions that I've heard. And I know that we're talking kind of in LinkedIn world, but my preach is that this applies everywhere. I worked with a company and they were 75% remote, even though we were all together in person. When I spoke with them, 75% were remote, and they were from all over the United States. that is something that they had not thought through when they were like, well, how can we do some of these things that you're saying we should do when we aren't in the same room? It takes a little more being intentional and planning to make that happen, but it's still impactful. And I love that you're saying we're so close and you're in Canada. I love that we're saying that it was impactful because you consistently kept showing up, because we all start somewhere. I think that message being heard is really important. How do you get companies to not just hear it, but actively do it when they are so worried about the boxes they have to check and they don't see, hey, my company can spend an hour and a half every week on Teams just getting to know each other and connecting? How do you get a company to shift their mindset?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Julie. To me, it starts with simple things. It's not necessarily some big boom, well, let's all get together in a virtual room and have a virtual party. Very rarely have I seen that be successful. To me, it's more at the minutia, right? The level of conversations that you have at the individual level. And I'll even looking at other communication mechanisms. So I know I'm talking about LinkedIn, but I see that working in any communication mechanism. Even an example like something like email, which is, often regarded as one of the worst forms of communication. By just adding exclamation marks, by just adding things like, how are you? How's your day? Or, if you know someone who's really passionate about a sports team or something, right? Adding a level of personalization, right? Ending rather than just the standard thanks, something like, I would say, have a fab day, have an amazing day, right? Appreciate you. Putting levels of gratitude into an email. Yes. You can take email from being a real terrible form of communication to being a form of, wow, here's some positive empowerment here, right? So whether it's Slack, whether it's messaging tools, whether it's email, I'm a firm believer that any communication mechanism can be transformed in a way that you can transmit energy, you can transmit kindness, you can transmit caring. That is all possible. You just have to take the time to transform it. And I think it's at those individual levels where you can start building up those levels of connection. It's not a big bang approach.
And I think you're 100%. And that means if it's not a big bang approach, you're going to have to your point, be consistent. You're going to have to try it for longer than a week, right? Yeah. I've had a couple companies that would encourage the relationship building and the connection, even in the remote workers, say, okay, but how long do we have to get to? Well, I don't know exactly, because I think it's hard to find perfect data for every different company and different types of personalities and different needs and different to-do lists for those people. To find the perfect mix is hard. You kind of just have to dedicate to, and you did this. What am I about on the inside? And you said that at the beginning. You said, I'm going to flip my mindset to others and I'm going to be about others, and it's paying off for you. But it took time and consistency for it to pay off for you. And when you dove in, you weren't 100% sure if it would pay off.
That's absolutely the case. I'll be honest, there were days where I was like, is this good? Why am I bothering with this, right? And the thing that kept me going in those times where I was truly questioning whether I should just completely stop was I would write down and think about all the life-changing friendships I had as a result. And I would look at those, and that was my fuel to keep going, right? And some days nothing appears, other days it's just like it's an onslaught. Speaking opportunities, all sorts of things that pop up, right? Coaching clients, cybersecurity clients. It's something which, to the point too, you can't say, oh, this will do it for 30 days and it will work, right? I always say it's like getting a 6-pack of abs, right? You're not going to get those after doing 3 crunches, right?
Okay.
And this goes back to what we talked about earlier. So many people are locked in that instant gratification mindset, right? There's too much short-term thinking. We live in an age of instant gratification, right? And we need to understand that things that are truly worth achieving take time, effort, and consistency, right? And I'm a big believer in consistency, but that to me again is the key piece in all of it. Which by doing it consistently, still leaving some room for maneuverability. Like tactically, I've made changes over time as well, but the overarching piece is the same, right? And you have to do it consistently, right? And like I said, any physical trainer, if you were to ask them, well, can I get 6-pack of abs in 3 days? They'll tell you no, right? They'll say, show up at the gym every day, put in the effort, long-term thinking versus short-term thinking.
That's good. That's so good. In relationships, It's good in my workout plan. Let go of instant gratification. It's hard to do, but I think it's worth it. I think building those connections is, and Marcus said it in a podcast that we did, relationships are currency right now. Because we're in a time after COVID where relationships were hard for a while and we had to learn how to do them differently. I feel like we have, to your point and why we're having this conversation, you built this relationship on LinkedIn, and now we have this, not only a working relationship, but this friendship. And I'm not the only one. You did this, but there was a time we didn't know how to do this. We had to evolve a little.
Oh, absolutely. I point to the evolution of oneself as well. I look back at corporate me. There's a lot of fundamentals of me are the same, but corporate me, it was a very different reflection of the version that you became friends with, Julie. It was what I really learned as an entrepreneur, and especially during my early days on LinkedIn, was challenging what I referred to as assumptions about myself. I performed what I call an audit assumption, things that I held to be true. I was never a big relationship builder, right? I was actually quite shy, right? I wasn't big on friendship building or any of those things. I was singularly focused and just trying to climb up the corporate ladder, right? Regardless of whose back I had to climb up to get there. It required a level of challenging beliefs that I held about myself, either beliefs that I held core or things that were imposed on me by others. And I went through that systematically, and it allowed me to explore what I referred to as hidden dimensions about myself. I never, from 20 years ago, when I started my career, I didn't see myself as a public speaker. I certainly didn't see myself as a coach. I certainly didn't see myself as someone who would spend, an hour and a half every day building relationships and spreading positive energy. Those were not things I held to be true when I started my career. But by looking intrinsically inward, doing that assumptions audit, that's something I always start with my coaching clients. Write down those assumptions that you hold to be true about yourself and explore those hidden dimensions, right? Take the time to explore other venues about yourself. And I know you mentioned Marcus. I'm going to give him credit for this. He allowed me to see other versions of myself. As an example with speaking, I always assumed I was only qualified to speak about cybersecurity. And he was like, dude, you can talk about entrepreneurialism. You can talk about relationship building. You've done all these things. I remember glass shattering in my mind when that happened. And again, it allowed me to explore those hidden dimensions about myself. And when you explore hidden dimensions about yourself, you are embracing evolution. You're embracing the fact that you're able to continually evolve and find new and better versions of yourself. Because at the end of the day, we're all on this amazing journey of trying to find that best version of ourselves.
And it grows. I mean, if you're not growing, what are you doing with yourself?
Excellent point.
I use this image when I get to speak about growth too, is growth equals change. Change equals loss. Loss equals pain. So growth might always be a little bit painful because not all of us love the change and the loss. And for you lost an hour and a half of your day, maybe doing tasks you thought were really important at one point in order to shift your mindset and grow as a connector.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, it's the proverbial sort of no pain, no gain. I use the analogy too of growth spurts. Like when, as a child, when you grow, especially as you get a little bit older, you get growing pains. I remember I had really bad growing pains in my shins as I was getting taller. Any type of growth does require some level of pain. But again, it's about embracing that. It's about being able to embrace that change is a good thing or can be a good thing, right? And how do you make sure that you are embracing your past, using that as a launchpad for the future, and using your current state of change as rocket fuel to get you to an even better version of yourself, right? And because again, that's one of the amazing things, certainly in life, is that you're not, like to your point there, you're not just always staying static, right? To me, that continuous journey of always finding and bettering yourself, I find incredibly beautiful, right? Because of who I am today is very different than who I was, 10 years ago. I'm very excited to see what I'm like 10 years from now. But the whole point is that we're continuously growing, continuously changing, right? And I think that's remarkably beautiful.
I love that so much. I want to talk for a second about assumptions. I love what you said about starting with your assumptions and seeing the deep dive of why they're there and what you want to change. How did you take these assumptions you had about yourself and grow them into goals that you wanted to create for who you wanted to be?
I see this, the awakening moment was when I left corporate and became an entrepreneur, and I was quite sudden. I not really planned for that. I just abruptly pulled the parachute and left. I realized how unprepared I was to be an entrepreneur, and that the person that I was in corporate would not allow me to be successful as an entrepreneur. One day someone said to me, well, why don't you try public speaking? And I thought, public speaking, I'm not sure about that. And then I thought about other things that I saw other things I would need to learn. So as an entrepreneur, I need to learn sales. I needed to learn marketing. I had never been taught those things. I never used those skills. And I thought, okay, well, here are things I need to do. I'll take an inventory, right? And this is sort of maybe me being the security and everything. Thinking, to do security, I need to know what my current state is and where's my target state kind of thing. So I sort of took that same type of mentality. Okay, well, right now I'm good at speaking in meetings, all these things, but I want to try to make money. I need to be better at, public speaking, and speaking at events, becoming a paid speaker. I need to be learning how to do sales. I need to get out of my shell. I need to be doing cold calling or reaching out to people, right? Sales, well, that's relationship building. We'll learn how to do that, right? So it was that type of assumption approach, and I refine that every year. In fact, to this day, and I'm 10 years in as an entrepreneur, every year I always do an assumption audit about myself. What do I currently hold to myself to be true? And, based on where I think I still need to go, what should I challenge, right? And maybe I'll pick something that I feel I should challenge. And it was through that process where I found about sales. I was doing sales, I'll say it from the old school approach, right? Very, very guerrilla type sales, and it's what that wasn't getting me anywhere. And I thought, okay, I'm going to challenge how I'm doing sales. And then it just dawned on me one day. I thought, well, when people reach out to me, it actually was dawned on me was someone who called me about carpet cleaning. They were just so kind on the phone. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I could get my carpets cleaned. And I sat down and I thought, wow, that was so powerful. The first one, I thought, well, what about sales through kindness? So I started experimenting and tinkering, and that sort of led me down the path that I went down.
Oh my gosh. Well, I love that it led you down that path, because it is gold for anybody that is watching you thrive. And it's gold for anyone who is taking notes and maybe also doing an assumption audit about themselves, or trying to be more kind in general to other people, because you're an inspiration in that way. And I love having that conversation, because I think it's really impactful. Now, I work a lot with leaders, and I find that the people that bring me in to work with their companies or their school districts, they're the people that are like you. They are the people that will sit down and do an assumption audit every year. They're willing to do some goal setting for growth. What do you say to the people who maybe aren't in that headspace yet?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Julie. The thing that I've used this in my coaching, in my coaching session, I use the 5-10 year rule, where I say, okay, think about version 5 years from now, or version of you 10 years from now. They're looking back and talking to you right now. What would they say? Would they say, hey, you know what, you're doing everything right, you're going to be fantastic 10 years from now? Or are they going to say, hey, you know what, you're a miserable person then? You're going to be a miserable person 10 years from now, because you haven't made those changes. So I'm a big believer in deep visualization and trying to really picture in the future. If the current path, that current trajectory you're on, right, your current version of yourself, are you going to be that same version, or are you going to be a more evolved version that will have you further ahead in life? Are you feeling more fulfilled, happier, what have you, whether it be from a personal or career perspective? I'm a big believer, like I said, those deep visualization exercises where we have those future echoes of ourselves and having those conversations. So that's what I would say. And again, sometimes people buy into that and will have that, but there'll always be some subset of people that are just uncoachable.
I was going to say, you're so right. And I love that you just said they're uncoachable, because I think there are people that they don't want to grow. They are uncoachable. And when you're stuck in a work environment with someone like that, that makes you look at your 5 to 10 year path, which is kind of what you did in corporate world, and go, who do I want to be in 5 to 10 years?
The whole thing in which, if we're willing to humble ourselves and have those conversations with ourselselves, and even have that being, you can't have that conversation, have it facilitated by a coach to help you get, ponder those questions. That to me, again, is all about unleashing your inner awesomeness, something that I love talking about. We all have some level of inner awesomeness, but we need to be able to unleash that in some fashion, right? And like we said, there's some people who are willing to do the work to do that, and there's always going to be a subset that are unwilling to do that, and that's okay. That's just the variables that human life brings us.
Absolutely, I love that. Okay, so tell us something that we haven't learned yet about you, or a project that you are working on. I want to hear a little bit more.
I guess the thing that people don't know about me is that I'm quickly becoming a classic car nerd. My 5-year-old son, James, he loves classic cars. In fact, from when he was probably 2, he was able to distinguish between a Camaro and a Mustang, something I still struggle with today. I'm not a car guy. No one in our family is a car guy, a car person, but he absolutely loves it. So as we enter our spring and summer here in Vancouver, car shows have started popping up, and he's waited through a very long winter to be able to go back to them. And we just went to one this past Wednesday, and he loves doing that, right? And it's something I love doing with him. It's something I would never have imagined doing with my son, but it's something that a lot of people don't know. But I think it's really neat. It's a way to really connect with the past. That's a way to also see that you can take things that are old and evolve them in a way that are incredibly beautiful when you restore a car. And I see the parallels with our own lives, right? If you're at any point in your life, you can always restore that model, right? You can restore it back to where it was, but even add on top of that. Just like you see with some of these classic cars, now they restore them, they have their air conditioning, right? They have nicer seats, quite like they were when they were new, but they were restored to former glory, plus an evolved version. I think that can all be true of ourselves as well, Coach.
I love that. That is so good. Making it all sound so beautiful. I love that. So tell us the big takeaways from today. What are 3 takeaways you hope that we can sink our teeth into from today?
Number 1 is the self-assumption audit, right? Do that, make it an annual exercise. Again, there are tremendous opportunities when you take a closer look at yourself and explore those hidden dimensions through that assumption audit. So that's number 1. Number 2 is never underestimate the power of kindness. And a lot of people are just either not kind to themselves, and as a result, they're not kind to others. If you truly want to see progress in your life, start by being kind to yourself, and then you'll be in a better position to start being kind to others. Kindness / positivity is one of the greatest fuels. And the third one is invest in meaningful relationships, right? Even if you're someone who is, a introvert, and you know what, I was introverted too, right? And to some degree, I'm still somewhat of an introvert. But if you're willing to put yourself out there, willing to show up consistently and invest in relationships, again, I promise you that will bring incredible magic to your life.
I love that. And I agree. Could not agree more. All right. Last question that I have to ask. What's a favorite quote you have? What do you look back on or just love? Give me a quote.
One of my favorite quotes: seek to help first, seek to serve first, seek to be kind first, and you'll never have to work a day in your life. I truly believe that, and I've seen that, where if you're helping people and you come from a place of kindness, again, magical things will happen. So love, compassion, serve, help. Nothing will feel like work from that point forward.
I love that. These are beautiful takeaways. Dominic, thank you so much for spending time with me today. I have loved it. I think you're incredible. I hope that it resonates with everybody listening to the People Priority podcast also. All right. Thanks, Dominic.
Thank you, Julie. Appreciate you.
Thanks for listening and being my people. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, hook me up with a 5-star review wherever you're listening right now. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to the People Priority podcast so you don't miss out on more tips, tricks, and important reminders. All right, I'll see you next week.